So again, thank you so much there. I received an invitation to deliver this talk last year as well, but I was under the weather. And as is tradition, I am also under the weather right now, but luckily I have a voice, so I will still use it. Um, I am Brandon Collier. I'm a doctoral researcher at the Venom Systems and Proteomics Lab at the University of Galway in the Republic of Ireland. And for the last 4 or so years, I have focused on the ecological aspects, the urban ecological aspects of Steatoda nobilis, so the noble false widow spider, which has gained quite a little bit of infamy, especially in the media, for its medical importance, which had some quite rare side effects. But it has been also noted as being a pervasive cosmopolitan species. Initially, I had looked at just this species within Ireland, but over the course of a master's degree there, I was able to produce some very, very good results all over the island of Ireland there. So within the Republic, at least. I'll go into some more detail there. So, according to this lovely British Archaeological Society atlas here in the new system, again, we have a lot of these reports coming in from that scheme within Britain. But in Ireland, it's relatively unknown, aside from various citizen science outlets, which, of course, have a little bit of dubiousness to their validity of their identifications. So having a professional eye go in and have a look to see how the distributions are and how the assemblages of the spiders are within urban habitats, that allowed us to be able to get an idea of urban spiders in Ireland. This was all really based on a paper that came out, which showed, this is Rayner et al. Here from 2023, it did show that the noble false widow was able to, in terms of combativeness and in terms of competition, able to overtake a lot of European spiders that are based in Ireland as well. And we were able to kind of see that this trend happened in all samples except for one. But the actual field side of this was well unknown. And so in order to classify that, I was brought in. So what I'm going to be sharing today is kind of a very stripped back look at a publication that came out earlier this year in Ecology and Evolution. This is the result of that master's chapter there. My other master's chapter was relatively basic. It was on a history of, what's it called? Latrodectidae, the introductions into Ireland specifically. So it's very interesting, but I'll go through that there and take you through our process. So initially there, we narrowed the search down to 6 urban centers, so that we surveyed in course of nighttime surveys there. So 4 of them were cities. So on the East Coast there, we have Dublin, we have Waterford, Cork, and Galway City as well. And then 2 sites were further afield. So Castlebar, which is a town in County Mayo, and then Sligo town in County Sligo. We surveyed 5 individual spots in each there over the course of 1 hour using some very familiar techniques, as we have some people on the call here who contributed to this methodology. But in order to streamline things and to be able to have a workable microhabitat to actually survey, we utilize fences. Fences are ubiquitous all over Ireland and in Britain as well. These ones here are very easy to look at. They're pretty much 2-dimensional, with very limited third dimensionality there. So it makes it very easy to visually identify a lot of the species that we looked at. But it wasn't just exclusively looking at the noble false widow here. We wanted to see what the spiders were there in general. And so it revealed some very interesting results, and for the first time getting an idea of what the urban ecology of Ireland looks like in terms of spider assemblages. So what we did, we utilized both editions of, or mostly the second edition of, the field guide produced by the British Archaeological Society there. I went out personally with a handful of volunteers. I think 6 of them in total. I have them thanked at the end there. And what we did was we measured out 10 meters of fencing and we surveyed at each of these 5 sites for an hour each. So it was long work. Definitely being able to keep track of spiders. It's better to have 2 people instead of one. We would always have 2 people out there, but it's the hard work that we had to do. And for one species or one family that we were able to kind of identify there, we did have to take it back into the lab. But this was only one record of the thousands that you'll see in our results here. So, of the relative abundance there, the old adage of it's common to be rare, but it's rare to be common comes up extensively. So we have 2 species here that really dominate the assemblage. We have Zygiella x-notata, so the missing sector orb weaver, which is very, very common. These ones here, they were introduced into Ireland probably 200 years ago, 150 to 200 years ago, by our estimates. And then we have Steatoda nobilis as well, which was only introduced into the island of Ireland around 35 years ago. So that does show some very, very interesting precedent there. So it shows that this synanthropic species was able to take advantage of favorable microhabitats with that. But that's just the alpha diversity. This is it broken down into the various seasons, because of course we surveyed over the course of 1 year between 2022 and 2023, roughly corresponding to the seasons there. And with that, let me see here. Perfect, just getting rid of that. Yep. With that there, we were able to ascertain that all of these were relatively consistent in terms of their alpha diversity. All of these sites, regardless of season, shared these 2 dominating the assemblage, which is quite interesting. On the bottom there, I was able to include the amount of specimens that we found per each as well. But I have some other looks as well here. In terms of the beta diversity, we wanted to test to see if the actual sites were different, where they varied from each other, and we found that no, relatively they were consistent, which kind of indicates some degree of biotic homogenization, which is very interesting for a kind of assemblage that has been disrupted fairly recently within the last 35 years, but they did vary by season, which is to be expected. We did see a certain degree of expected loss in diversity and things there over, especially in the winter seasons, whenever overwintering happens and visible spiders on the outside and ones that we can see inside of their hides within the fences were relatively rare. So that makes sense there. But winter, it was the big one that can explain that. This is another look at it. This is just a dendrogram here. All this shows is 1, 2, 3, and 4, aside from the or up on the individual sites there. That just indicates the season. So 1 corresponds to the first season that we looked at, and so on, as well as the abbreviations of all the sites. And this shows the same thing, that there is a certain degree of definitely they're very, very similar in terms of everything here. So rather interesting. I also did take some very just general phenology kind of measurements here. I kept track of if it was an adult or sub-adult majority or juveniles mostly from first instar, which weren't really identifiable, and I put in the unknown section, onward to showing sex-related traits or traits of maturation there. These are just the 2 most dominant species. And as you can see, that ZX-notata there does show a very kind of up and down degree of plasticity in terms of its density, whereas the noble false widow stays relatively consistent throughout the year, much more consistent than the other species. Well, from what we saw in this year-long survey. What was very striking was we took some very basic diet data as well, just looking at the potential prey items there. From beetles, earwigs, to flies, etc. there. So you can see that it does follow a similar trend of how many that we found throughout these months there. So there might be some interesting things there, but the data was kind of inconclusive on whether they are actually linked, and further experiments are needed on that. Another thing that popped up, which was really quite striking, was that prey availability. So the presence of prey items, potential prey items that are known to be predated on by spiders, the presence in these urban habitats did have a very significant effect on this. So we are not able to ascertain why that is, of course, because the spiders themselves impact prey diversity and prey availability and what we were looking at. But it kind of shines some light is that there are some patterns going on here that are kind of elusive, and they will need some more testing in terms of what actually affects these the diversity within these urban deserts, you can call them, because a lot of these fences are very far removed from urban fixtures that you might see other synanthropic spiders in, just in terms of common occurrences there. I did look at the climatic conditions there, and of course, Galway is known for its weather, and so is most of Ireland there. And what we found was that no, the diversity of all the species was not dependent on climatic conditions. So I looked at wind speed, I looked at mean rainfall and temperature to see if there was anything that popped up. And no, these climatic conditions did not have any significant effect on diversity, which means that, as you can imagine, the spider populations are less affected like that and more like this. They're very hardy. They're taking some nice pictures out in the rain. These pictures were taken near my house in Galway. And of course, it's not just local to Western Europe here where we are. Of course, this species has recently, over the last decade or two, established permanent populations in western parts of, or sorry, yeah, western parts of North America, South America, most recently in New Zealand, and well outside of its proposed endemic range of Madeira and the Canary Islands. So it's very interesting. So there's a lot of things that we need to learn about that. And of course, just to mention that this newest establishment record has come out. So this ecological work is important because we want to see what the dynamics are between these species and their environment, and whether this species is able to act negatively on some populations. And of course, some very lovely pictures from iNaturalist here of the permanent population in California. I don't know when they learned to drive, but that's a very new development. It's very interesting just to see how these citizen science platforms are being used to see these very anecdotal accounts of interactions with native or non-native fauna. So what we know. So urbanization is an ever-expanding stressor and is a driver of biotic homogenization. That is a given. We know that urbanization is not going to stop anytime soon, and there are some species that have been able to extort this. They've also been able to extort, as you can see here, international human trade routes, and it's contributed to the rise of non-native spider introductions throughout the world, including in the UK and Ireland. And we've seen several instances of that. So it's not just Steatoda nobilis as well. Several other spiders within the same subfamily there, so Latrodectinae, have been able to form colonies that have pretty much acted negatively upon endemic species of the area. So it's a very good idea to keep an eye on these species and to understand how they're able to do this. So that's what I'm doing. So what we don't know, the ones that I've highlighted here is the ones that I'm working on. So the mechanisms that are allowing, let's do this here. Let me grab this here. Perfect. Sorry there. The mechanisms that allow widow spiders to be prolific invaders. We don't know the physiological or the behavioral or the environmental conditions that allow them to, for some species, to be able to take up cosmopolitan routes everywhere. Whether or not Steatoda nobilis is directly displacing native spider species in the UK and Ireland in a natural setting, we don't know that. Again, comparison studies on urban diversity in areas with none of those species, none of the false widows there, are needed, as I chose the two remote locations there. I chose those because previously they had not been recorded there, but within the last 7 years, they have taken up root in very, very, very strong ways. So I was not able to find a successful control. So, and then finally, the role of behavior, specifically in determining which widow spiders have invasive potential. We want to measure, we want to see if any degree of some cooperative behavior or social behavior is able to influence that, even if it's in certain life stages. So those two are the ones that I'm working on right now as part of my PhD, and it's very interesting. Our goal here is to inform the study of the ecology of these very, very fascinating spiders, and to see how pretty much how they're able to thrive. This work cannot be done by myself. It cannot be all done by myself. So I have a huge team behind me. I have some specific mentions there. My supervisor, Michelle Dugant, and my co-supervisor, Colin Lawton. Both of them are my backbones with that. But thank you all so much. I'd love to, if we have time for a couple questions, I would love to take them. If not, you can email me here, I'll go to the beginning here. There you go. You can email me at b.collier2@universityofgalway.ie. Thank you so much.
Brandon, thank you very much. One, for such an excellent talk, which was really clear. I can't claim to understand all of the statistics and the graphs presented, but really interesting. We certainly do have time for questions, probably five minutes. But also, thank you for keeping absolutely to time. Well done.
Thank you.
Probably easiest if people have got questions rather than continually unmuting microphones, if you can type it into chat. And so there is a question from Victoria Burton. So Victoria, thank you for your question. And she asks, is it always synanthropic where it's introduced?
That's really interesting. Initially, during my master's, I would have said likely yes. But no, as of this year, we have an introduction or a permanent establishment that we have noticed or that has been classified in northern Chile. So northern Chile is very interesting. It has a lot of climatic gradients, and specifically, this is the first record within a desert, and it's the first record outside of a native range where they are very clearly not taking advantage of synanthropic habitats. They were in a specific species of I think it was a yew tree out there. I could be mistaken, but they were only exclusively found along roadsides, probably introduced in that way through human means, but taking up in natural habitats. So that got published earlier this year. So it's really, really interesting that they're not purely synantropically based, which shows the potential that in some areas they could spread and potentially affect other distributions of species.
Thank you. Not if you've got a questions again, type it in. One from me, Brandon. You didn't touch on it specifically, but where this spider, and you talk about California, where it occurs alongside other of, should we say, the more infamous false widow spiders. How do the two get along? So how does Steatoda get along with Latrodectus species?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's purported from a couple of publications that there were areas where the Latrodectus species, specifically Hesperus, were more common in California, specifically Southern California. And then through the work of a few notable arachnologists out there, they surveyed these areas. And over time, they saw an uptick in the amount of Steatoda nobilis inhabiting the same sort of general habitats, and then a degradation in the records of the Latrodectus species. So again, this took place over a year, so it's not conclusive of a larger sort of displacement out there, but it is indicative of that trend. So whether or not they're able to cohabitate is unknown. I would love to take a look at that. I love the black widow spiders there. I love the Latrodectus species, and I think that they're fascinating. And I think that they're cousin species as well. Their interactions can show us a lot about both groups there, both genera.
Cool. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to throw one more in then, Brandon. So here in the UK, there's been a lot of discussion about the effect of Steatoda on some of our other, um, I wouldn't say endemic, but some of the more native species. I've seen some reports, for example, the effect on Nuctenia umbratica, walnut. Have you done any work on that? Is there any hard evidence? It's easy to surmise based on what you might see in an individual location like a back garden, but is there any actually sound evidence to suggest it's having an effect upon our native fauna?
That is a fantastic question. Noctinia umbratica is a fascinating species, and we were able to observe them fairly frequently in a lot of these habitats. But they, in terms of my observations out there, they were not as proficient in these ideal habitats. Of course, they throw large webs like some of the orb weavers do, and with these kind of implications there that we were seeing a kind of a downgrade of these species in these ideal urban habitats and more of the non-native species being pushed up there. So it's all anecdotal from what I've seen, but I would say that of all the species there that could be affected, specifically in the UK and Ireland, they are at the forefront of that. And the literature has brought that up as well. But from observational accounts, I can see the some of the effects that that's having, and it does require a bit more statistical analysis there, but it's quite shocking.
Okay. Thank you. So I've got three other questions. Two I'm going to lump
Perfect.
together. So for those of you listening, once we've done these three that are outstanding, we'll bring this talk to an end. So first of all, question from Simon Brown, and then I'm going to add another one onto it. What factors may have triggered Steatoda nobilis's initial expansion into the UK? And a very similar vein, although they may not be the same causes, do you have any thoughts about the impact of climate change for the future of this and other introduced species? So those two lumped together, and then I have another question from Helen afterwards.
That's great. Yeah, those lump together perfectly. So initially, whenever Steatoda nobilis was introduced to the UK, it was likely introduced in a port location. It just makes the most sense. There, we don't know of a population size. We don't have an exact date of when that might have happened. Of course, people aren't going out and observing spiders, though we love to do that ourselves. But it was only noticed whenever they had the established populations there. But in terms of their expansion inland, I would say that human habitat kind of uptick there. So the uptick of road infrastructure, of spacious interiors of cars, of more cars on the road, of like more rapid urbanization has contributed mostly to that. As well, contrary to what most people believe, these spiders are not mostly indoors. They, from what we can tell, are very happy with being in microhabitats that are suitable both within human settlements and outside. So it could be a lot of factors there, but definitely the uptick of urbanization was the direct cause of that. And in terms of climate change, you would only expect this to see, you would only expect to see this uptick continue to grow because of rising global temperatures. Of course, people are going to have to mitigate that using other things. But as long as global trade and as long as urbanization continues, which is likely, and of course that has an effect on climate change profoundly, you will see a lot more of these non-native spider introductions. And specifically with this species, you will likely see them in other places that you haven't seen them before. You might get small populations within certain areas that were previously deemed uninhabitable.
Right, and then Helen's question, and it maybe in a way it crossed over with the one that I said. So, Brandon, you said that we don't yet know what impact Steatoda nobilis is having on native species, or indeed longer established non-natives in Ireland. But you also said there's evidence that lactrodectids have impacted negatively on natives. Can you give some references for the latter? interested in this in the context of Badumna in the UK. It would be great to catch the beginning of its colonization of Ireland if and when that happened. It happened too fast in Britain. So
It definitely did. In terms of the first part there, the other time Latrodectids there, or more generally ferreted introductions have impacted negatively, the one example that comes to mind is what's it called? Latrodectus katipo in New Zealand, and the introduction of a false widow there that had been observed actually displacing or having a displacive trend over the course of many years. I don't have the exact reference off the top of my head there, but it is one of the only New Zealand references that we have to these interactions between these. So that was, of course, an endemic theritid being impacted by a non-native theritid spider. But in terms of other ones there, we don't have too much literature thus far. In terms of the literature there, that's the one that comes to mind. And that's the one that we've been using as a basis to see is like, oh, how are they impacting more established non-native species or the ones that have been here the longest? And we can only imagine because of this toolkit that this spider has, its venom profile specifically, its ability to, of course, extort humans for their resources in terms of producing lovely microhabitats and microclimates, gradients to live in. You would probably see a very, very stark trend there. It would take a lot of research to do it, and there hasn't been the funding yet, but if somebody were to give it to me, I would love to do it. I would love to see specifically a lot of those species that we mentioned, particularly Noctinia umbratica.
Brandon, thank you very much. We'll bring it to a close there. That's exactly half an hour since. So many thanks for your presentation. Really interesting. And we look forward to what else you might find. And if you ever have a thought of publishing something in either arachnology, I'm sure Paul would love to hear from you, or something not quite as in depth. We'd love to see something in the BS newsletter. So well done. Thank you very much.